Guys, I'm so excited for you to tune in to this episode as I bring in former judge, former attorney. Well, I guess we can't say former, but, in a different role, Anthony Bompiani to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to do this for many reasons, and we're going to get into so many other things through this episode, but I talk often on the show, right? Generation wealth. We talk about assets, we talk about business, but really none of those things matter if you don't have a few things in your life right? Yeah. Health is also wealth. Relationships is also wealth. And so I wanted to break down a little bit about kind of your background, what your background has been, your experience has been, maybe what you're doing now. And then I want to tee into how important your intimate relationship is when it comes to building wealth. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing for the last 20 years?
Shoot, yeah. So I am an attorney. I'm still an attorney. I still maintain my license. And I was, like you said, I was a judge for 5 years. I had a 6-year term. I quit after my 5th year to pursue what I'm doing now.
Obviously, so doing the judge side, seeing the attorney side, you have seen how, and not just divorce, right? Oftentimes people think when I talk about how a relationship can really destroy your wealth, they automatically think it's like divorce and separation of assets. But you can also see how it can keep you from the life that you want to create. So can you maybe talk a little bit about, obviously we'll go into the tactics of prenups and postnups, but just some things that maybe people can do in the beginning of a relationship to set themselves up for success?
Well, first off, to kind of give you a little bit more of a background, not you in particular, but your listeners and viewers. I went through a divorce personally, so in 2017. So I know that end of it too. I know how devastating it can be, not only like emotionally and mentally and physically, but also from a financial standpoint. It's a moment in someone's life that can be catastrophic if you allow it to be and if you're not set for it. That being said, with regard to a relationship, if your whole thing obviously is the wealth and the money side of things and the business side of things, but like you said, the relationship is so incredibly important. And I think a couple things are very important in particular. I think number one, it's important to start right out of the gate. Once you know that, look, this is a relationship. This isn't just like a dating thing. This is a relationship where it's going to get more serious, maybe pop the question, maybe get married. I think when you realize that it's a serious relationship, I think you need to start, having conversations about money, theories, philosophies, pasts, any skeletons in the closet that anybody needs to know or anything like that. And then also I think that in a different regard, it's not necessarily directly related to money, but kind of indirectly related to money, is that you are fully supporting the other spouse or the other party in whatever they're doing to create wealth, to make money, to earn a living. Because a lot of the times you'll get in a relationship and it'll start out on a casual basis, and it's fun, it's dating, it's movies, it's dinner, it's sex, whatever. And, once it takes the turn to be serious, people kind of are reluctant to really fully support the other party in their endeavors. And that's incredibly important. So it's not just the conversations, it's not just some of the shit that we'll talk about here with tools that you can use like legally, but it's also understanding that, look, if the two of you are going to really move forward and create wealth together, you gotta support each other. And that's not necessarily like being a financial partner with them or a business partner with them or whatever. It's doing what you have to do to let that person grow. And then if you want to do it the right way, you in turn also have to be growing. Because if not, number one, you're going to be sitting around twiddling your damn thumbs unless like you have kids or some other thing going on while they're out, earning and living and building wealth. But number two, if you're not growing also personally, then resentment starts to creep in.
Yeah.
You know, you start to resent the person, and then resentment is like, I mean, it's one of the number one killers of a relationship if you let it, you know, let that happen. So it's very, you know, all those things are very important in my experience.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, you've seen so many people in their worst moments, right? Nobody reaches out to a divorce attorney. Nobody is in front of a judge for some beautiful thing that happened in their life, right? Like, oh, we're celebrating this thing. So you're seeing them in their worst. Could you find, and I don't know if you've ever been asked this before, but if you were to look back at all of the different people and situations, and you could just generalize one thing that maybe happened before the big, right? Because the big thing that happens, like most people aren't surprised when they go through a divorce.
Yeah.
There's all these things that they ignored along the way.
Yeah.
Is there maybe something, a common denominator that you could help people now that are in a relationship to say, don't ignore this one thing?
I think it's two things. Like, I think there are a lot of things that cause demise in a relationship, but most of them are symptoms and not the cause. Things like adultery, things like debt, you know, financial issues. You know, abuse is obviously one, but that one I'm not going to talk about as much right now. But there are things like adultery, like money issues, you know, just loss of love or whatever it might be. But those, in my opinion, are from what I've seen with people, are actually symptoms. The cause of those things, I think, are two things. I think it's growth and change that is not like that you don't like encourage and you don't experience together. Like if one party's change, like all of us are going to change, right? When you get married, you're in one season of your life. And if you're like going to be with that person for the rest of your life, like your ass isn't going to be the same person when you got married as you were like, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from then. So you're going to experience change. The problem is that change is either resented by the other party, not accepted by the other party, or just the two of you just change so much that you start to grow apart. And then the second thing is, besides like change that isn't like discussed and, you know, your marriage is modified for it, the second thing is communication. Communication is really, really, really big. Because if you are not able to communicate together, it is going to lead to a lot of changes, a lot of discomfort, a lot of questions, a lot of mistrust, a lot of disloyalty, you know, things like that if you don't have that open line of communication. So the biggest thing that I would recommend for people to try to avoid divorce is learn how to freaking communicate. Like, and I don't mean just like surface level communication. Like, I mean, like being able to communicate about what you're feeling, about what your fears are, you know, especially with men, right? Communicate what your feelings are, what your fears are, what you're you know, what you're afraid of moving forward, right? And you gotta do it in a way that the other side understands too.
So two things I thought of in there. Number one, you said a lot about change.
Yeah.
Right. So change is guaranteed. We're all going to change, but growth is not.
Yeah.
Right? It's like growth as a human, growth in the relationship. So, and you talk about communication as one of those factors to growth. So are there a few things that you could say that you've seen with also your psychology background of how people can start the communication? Because I think there's so many people that think, okay, great, Judge, that's great. Yeah, communicate. But how do I even do that? How do I share what I feel without angering the other person or upsetting the other person or make sure that I'm heard?
Well, one of the things is you have to understand, like you not only have to be able to communicate in your own right, but you have to understand how your partner communicates. Because you may be like a freaking like award-winning communicator, but if you're not doing it in a way that your partner understands and that your partner like takes in information and, you know, analyzes information internally. Like if you're not communicating in the way that your partner is able to communicate, you basically be like talking to a wall, right?
Yeah.
You might be saying, in your perspective and in your estimation, you might be saying all of the right things, but if you're not saying it in a way that they understand it, then you're not saying anything at all. You're saying a bunch of like foreign language jibber jabber.
It's like two different languages.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, is learning how they communicate and be able to do, be able to communicate in the same way that they do. And shit, I forget what the other one was.
Well, we can come back to that.
Yeah.
We can always come back to it if it comes to you.
Yeah.
But I also want to talk about the tactical side, right? So let's say that someone's listening. They're like, that's great, but I just think it's too far gone. And I didn't do a prenup in the beginning, which maybe we should allude to, because I did an episode on this and we got a lot of feedback. People really enjoyed it.
Cool.
We just talked about the differences of a prenup and a postnup, but of course I'm not a lawyer, so this was just my experience and why it's needed in wealth. But I also say everyone should just find their own opinion. If it's for you, great. If it's not, that's okay too.
Yep.
So let's say they're not great at communication. They're in a really bad spot. They didn't do the prenup, or maybe they didn't have anything to protect in the beginning, and now they do. Can you give us a few examples of why a postnup might be a situation for someone to at least consider if they're already in a relationship married?
Yeah, I've seen postnups for various reasons, right? I've seen postnups for changes in the financial aspects of the relationship and assets and liabilities. And if you create a new business and you're the one like putting all the work in the business, and maybe the other party's has a drug problem.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
right?
That's good.
Maybe they have a mental health issue, right? Maybe they have some issue that arises during the marriage, that now it's like, oh no, like if we're going to try to work this thing out and move forward, like I want to make sure I'm protected. So, you're not like, most of the times like a postnuptial agreement is going to come up in a relationship that's already experiencing like some sort of turmoil. You know what I mean? Like if you're in you're not going to get married, be like through the honeymoon phase and like start a business and be like, oh shoot, like, I mean, you can, but that's usually not what happens, because usually that type of person is going to do a prenup. Right.
But if they're already married?
Yeah, if you're already married, obviously it's a postnup. But I'm saying like typically it's because issues arise where you're like, oh shoot, I bet I got to protect myself.
And what if it's a circumstance change? Like let's say, for example, someone's married and they have very wealthy parents and they're going to get an inheritance.
Yep.
And for one reason or another, whether it's a great relationship or not, they just want to make sure that money is protected should there ever be a divorce. Could a postnup work for that as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be an issue, right?
No, I'm saying that like the reasons that I have seen why people want them, right?
Makes sense.
Change of circumstances, obviously, but then there's all those other issues too. Like I've seen people who have had like either infidelity issues or issues like that, and people will work that into their postnuptial agreement. Basically, like, kind of like, okay, look, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and we're going to try to grow through this and move forward with this, but your ass is going to sign this agreement because like if this happens again, like I want to make sure like I'm fully protected. Like situations like that. So, but yeah, I mean, the postnuptial agreement just means postnuptial. So post your vows, right? Post getting married. So, and then the prenup is before that. They both do the same thing. They both protect both parties. They both outline what's going to happen if you do get divorced, different things like that. So yeah, the only difference is one's before and one's during.
Yeah, it's good. I want to talk a little bit about too, you'd mentioned when you were giving a few different reasons of why people may get divorced, or maybe that they're not communicating well, and you said, I don't want to really talk about that, and the abuse word came up. And I know you talk a lot in your content and in your course about, narcissistic abuse. And I think it's a word, I don't know if you agree or not, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's thrown around a lot, but it's not necessarily all people are narcissists. Some people are maybe selfish, they have an ego, they have narcissistic tendencies, right?
Yeah.
But it just seems to get thrown around as a really hot button word. But those people that have experienced true narcissists really have been on the other side of abuse.
Yep.
In some way, emotionally, mentally, and maybe there's someone listening that have dealt with other abuse as well. And I think it's always important anytime in good conscience that I am interviewing someone about relationships, that I think it's important to share that anything that you say, what I'm going to ask you next, does not apply to someone that's being abused at the moment.
Oh, absolutely.
I just think that's an important caveat because as someone who has been on the other side of that and not in the best relationships, I've heard so many people like, you can make it better and just communicate. But when you're actually being abused, there's no reason to stay.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. That's why earlier when I was giving you the reasons and I mentioned abuse, what I didn't want to I didn't want to make the listeners think that I was like tying that into what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Right. So because that's a whole different scenario, right? And the problem with the abuse thing is, is that where we're going? Or are we going narcissistic?
It's up to you.
All right. Yeah. I mean, the problem with the abuse thing is, and if we're going to talk about like divorces and child custody cases, is you have a situation where if someone's being abused, right, they're not reporting it. Okay, they're not reporting it because they're scared, because they're embarrassed, because they don't want to human beings want to try to see the best in the person they're with, right? A lot of times there's religious pressure, right? Because you're committed to this person under the vows, by the altar.
You got societal norms.
Yeah, societal norms. You don't want to go to church the next day like being like a victim. Like people don't want to be victims. Most people don't want to be victims, right? So the problem is that while that is going on, you're trying to just hope for the best, hope that it changes, hope that it stops, right? So you're not reporting it to anybody, and you're not doing anything. What happens is when that behavior happens over time, eventually the victim gets pushed to the point where it's enough is enough, right? I just did a post the other day. It was basically like the theory was basically like be grateful that they got as bad as they did, because if they didn't, you still might be living in that hell.
So good.
Right? They pushed you. It's like if you're working, and I'm certainly not comparing being abused to a job, but it's like if you're working a job that just kind of sucks or sucks a little bit, you could end up staying there for the rest of your life. And then at 80, be like, why the hell did I do that? Right? It's just when it gets really shitty, that's when you start to look for something else. So regardless how that plays out, the person ends up leaving. And when the person ends up leaving, they experience initially, obviously there's fears involved, but there's also like a surge of like a feeling of freedom, right? And a feeling of like power almost, right? Almost like I like to explain it almost like an uncaged animal. Like it's like you were caged your whole life. Now you finally break free. You finally have like this new strength, right? Well, now what happens is you're in a custody battle or a divorce legal proceeding with this person, right? And now you're free, so you're able to tell the truth, right? And you don't give a shit anymore what people think, and you want the truth to be told. Well, now what happens is you're in a very sticky situation, because when you bring that up, the other side's attorney is going to be saying things like, you never brought it up before. You never told anybody before. You never went to the cops before. Are you just doing this now because you're trying to get custody of your kids? So it's a very, very, very shitty situation. It's one of the reasons why I do what I do, because I try to help people through that situation. And it's messed up. Like, it's messed up that it happens that way, but unfortunately, like, the reality is that it does happen that way. And then with the narcissist term, sure, that term's thrown around everywhere, right? Everybody. I did was it the Backstreet Boys? The everybody song. I did a piece of content like that. Like, how many people think their exes are the narcissist when they get divorced?
When they're just a jerk.
Yeah. So, but the thing is like, we all have narcissistic tendencies. Like, we all have an ego. We all
have triggers.
We all have triggers. We all have an ego. We all protect our ego, right? It's just that some of us are more out of control and more consistent in that behavior than, like, if you're in a particular situation and your ego's hurt, so you say something you shouldn't say or whatever. A narcissist has a massive but fragile ego. So it's very, very huge, meaning that that's all they care about is the self. Right? But it's very, very fragile, so anything can hurt it and make them react a certain way. Now, the problem is that you'll have people say, well, only 2% of the population is narcissist diagnosed. This word's thrown around too much. Well, yeah, that's true, but also, like, you're not going to have a narcissist go into, like, therapy voluntarily and, like, admit what they're doing.
Yeah.
So they're never going to be diagnosed. So, like, is it overused? Yes, it's overused. Are there way more people that are narcissistic than diagnosed? 1,000,000%.
So overused but underdiagnosed.
Yes, very, very much so. And then not only that, but, like, You know, people feel that way because even if it's not a situation where like an abuse situation, like just because they're narcissistic doesn't mean that there was necessarily abuse going on during the divorce. You know, a lot of times that's what happens, but that doesn't necessarily equal the other, right? But what happens is like they might, like, you think they're narcissistic. Everybody thinks their ex is narcissistic because when they're in that particular situation of high conflict and high turmoil, it like blows up all of their symptoms. Like they're magnified like so much. So that's when it can get really bad, and that's where people like me step in to try to help people through that, because it can be devastating.
Yeah, and confusing and unclear because you've been programmed with all of these things and you start believing them, right? And so I don't normally interject, but I just want to interject.
I remembered my other. Remember earlier when I was saying about the two ways to communicate?
Was the second thing?
One was learning how the partner communicates, right? Because you have to talk that way. The other one was learning both of your own triggers. Like you got to learn, like especially if you're coming from like a relationship, like that you had a previous relationship, like whether it be a marriage or just a long-term relationship and a negative one, you're going to carry into the new relationship triggers from your old relationship. So you have to make sure that when you're communicating with that person, not only do you have to know their communication style and what's important to them and how they hear things and you know, digest things, but you also have to know about their triggers so that you can not only respect them when you're communicating to that person, but then the two of you can also talk about them, you know, so that they are also aware of them.
Yeah.
Right? So, I don't know why. Probably because you said the word trigger.
Yeah, that's good. No, I think that's so important. And I think I just wanted to interject because we were talking about abuse and narcissism and narcissism. And I just want to make sure that anyone listening, I feel this is just on my heart to share, that if you're in an abusive relationship right now, don't rationalize it. Don't fantasize it. Don't think that their potential is going to be down the road and that you can somehow save them from it. You need to get out and you need to see it from an outside perspective. If you have kids and you're married, I'm not even saying necessarily that you have to get divorced, but I am saying that you need to get out of that situation so that you can see it from the outside. Because when you're in an abusive relationship, you don't realize how bad it is until you're out of it. And oftentimes the people around you don't want to share how bad it is because they're worried that if you get back together with the guy or the girl, then now all of a sudden you're not going to be friends with them. So I just wanted to, I don't normally interject in my interviews, but I just wanted to
Can
make
I
sure
add something to it?
Yes, of course.
If you're in that situation and Candy's right, get the hell out. Like don't make excuses for them, right? You know, it's good. The reason why you probably have been is because you're probably very empathetic. You probably overlook the red flags because you try to see the best in people, you hope the best for people, etc. But you have to get out. And if you do get out, and I should say when you get out, if you get out and there's like a particular event that happens when you get out, like an abusive event, right? Whether it be physical or threatening or, you know, emotional, whatever it is. And you file something for it, whether it be criminal charges or protection from abuse or restraining order or anything, and then you move into your custody case or your divorce case if it's relevant in your divorce, don't think really, really, really hard and talk to your lawyer over and over and over again before you drop those charges. You're going to be pushed to drop those charges so that you can just focus on the custody, or you can just focus on the divorce, or we can wrap this into the divorce. That's going to be the kind of shit that's being told to you. The problem is like I said earlier, you go through that relationship not reporting anything.
Yeah.
Now you finally have proof of something that you reported. You know damn well what's going to happen if you drop that.
Yeah.
Everything you said before was bullshit, right? It's not. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Okay.
You've been the whole time.
Sorry.
We have to put an E on this one.
So that's like, you know, I hate to say it like this because, you know, people don't like when I refer to it as like a game, but unfortunately litigation is a game. So that's kind of like your ace in the hole, is like to keep, if it's something that's provable like that and it's an event, when you do finally get the power to leave, talk long and hard with your attorney before you back out of that and find out all of the pros and cons, because that could be a devastating thing to your case if there was no evidence during the relationship, no evidence meaning it was never reported. and then you finally do have evidence, and then you drop it, because then it calls into question your credibility throughout the rest of the case.
Why didn't you report it? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's so good. Great advice. And I think that, like, obviously there's probably, hopefully, far more people listening now that aren't in that situation.
Sure,
but for those that are, that's our advice. And if you're not, I want to give everyone else some advice, right? Because I think that there's a difference between good and great. Mm-hmm. There is good businesses and great businesses. There's good relationships. There's great relationships. Mm-hmm. There's good asset amounts and net worth, and there's great. So what are some of the things that anyone listening, that they're in a happy relationship, it's not abusive, they're not with a narcissist, and they just would like things to be a little better? How can they make their relationship better? Because I think that when we have better relationships, we're able to accomplish our goals better. We're able to be aligned with the person that we're with. We're able to accomplish more. Yeah. So what are some of the things that they can maybe do in that regard?
Yeah, first off, I mean, obviously the biggest thing, like I talked about earlier, is the communication with the triggers, mm-hmm. and, you know, supporting your partner when they grow and everything. But there's also a little tool that I use when I'm dealing with people that are involved in custody cases, high conflict divorce cases. But it's also a tool. It's not only a tool that can be used for that. It's a tool that can be used in relationships. It's a tool that can be used in business in general, or like just success in general, or whatever. And what it is it's like when things are not feeling optimal, or maybe bad, or maybe just, like you said, not great, good but not great, you want them to better. There's three things that I like to tell people to focus on, and it comes down to the little name FML. Okay, FML, right? It's not the normal FML, what people use it for on the internet, but FML are the three focus areas that you want to develop whenever you're either trying to strengthen a relationship, strengthen, just yourself, just grow, like, into something different, get out of like a valley that you may be in, right? And F is faith and fitness, okay? So focus on your faith, focus on your fitness, okay? If you don't go to church, start going to church. If you can't go to church, start praying. Start, whatever your religion is, right? Whatever your faith is, start to get in touch with that and develop that. If you're in a relationship and you're trying to do it to get your relationship to get great, like you said, do it together, right? Do it together and really, really dive into it. If you're a Christian, start reading Bible scriptures together, right? Fitness, everybody can benefit from fitness. Right? Not only because it's healthy for your body and your mind, but also what it does is it gives you a sense of accomplishment and a sense of strength and a sense of like an ability to do anything, right? Again, if you're trying to get your relationship better, do fitness things with your spouse, mm-hmm. right? Go do if competition is your thing, like do a race together, do a like a show together, right? Like a fitness show, right? I remember somebody mentioned that to me before, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's one, faith and fitness.
Well, and if you think about it, you're already spending time together.
Yes.
Right? So people often think, I don't have, well, if you're already going to sit and watch a show or binge a Netflix series or anything like that, if you go do fitness together, that physical, like all the data supports it. This isn't awesome. Like some like new epiphany.
It's awesome.
All the data supports that it's going to benefit your whole physical self, so you're going to feel more confident as you're going through a difficult time or just trying to figure out yourself in a relationship. So I think that that's really, really important because you're spending the time anyway. So do it in a way that's going to help your spiritual success, your physical success, because that'll obviously pay dividends everywhere.
Yeah, because there's something I call the transferred mindset effect. It's basically like, I use it for divorce, but it can be used for relationships too. So in divorce, I'll talk about it for relationships. So if you're in a shitty relationship, then you're going to transfer that mindset into other areas of your life. So it's going to negatively impact your business. It's going to negatively impact your fitness level, your family relationships. Like, it's going to negatively impact a lot of things. But the really cool thing about the transferred mindset effect, which is why fitness and all these other FML things that we're going to talk about, is because if you can create a positive mindset in a different area of your life and include your partner, then you can transfer that positive mindset into your relationship and reap the results and the benefits from that. Right?
Yeah, so good. And the other alternative, what you're going to go with wine and drink and party,
Which is
fine
not, too,
which is okay. but I think it was Travis Hearn that said there's a lot of unhappy people at happy hour.
Yeah,
Which I thought was such a great line. So focusing on your health, the competition,
the unhappiest people.
Yeah, the unhappiest people are at happy hour. Yeah. So that's the F.
M is mindset. M is mindset. Affirmations, if you're into affirmations, meditation, if you could find 5 minutes in a day to do it, to focus on releasing, again, if you're trying to do it for your relationship, you meditate and do affirmations on things with regard to your relationship, or you bring your partner in, you do them together, right? What are some of your goals? What are some of your, not only like achievement goals, but like goals as a relationship, as a way you want to feel, right? How do you want to feel? Implement that into your affirmations, to your meditations, anything else you do for mindset, yoga, like whatever it is. And then L is love. And it's not just love like a romantic love. It's love like any other relationship, okay? So it might be like call, like for me, like a couple times what I would do is like I would call my mom and invite her to lunch. And just have that interaction of someone, right? Because when we're in usually when we're in a really bad spot, we're in solitude.
Yeah.
We're usually in solitude. And if you're in a bad spot with your significant other, or it's just not as great as it can be, I'm going to guess there's a little bit of an element of solitude within that relationship, right? So again, if you're doing it for your relationship, going and having that human contact and that love with obviously not romantic love with someone else if you're in a relationship, but that love, like maybe it's like if you're older and your kid's older, or even if your kid's younger, going and like watching them, like enjoying them, like play a sport, or like if they're real little, like play or whatever.
And if you don't have a family for anyone, or you don't, just because obviously being an only child, and me, I often think like that's why I got involved in charity, because the opposite of addiction is connection. 100%. The opposite of misery is connection. Like 100%. A lot of the things we can solve by being connected, and we're in a world where we're connected to more things than ever, but we're disconnected from all the people that we actually come in contact with in our life. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have someone in your life, the other way that you can do this is by getting involved in something that is beyond you, that is not just you. It's a nonprofit, it's your church, it's whatever, that you can help and serve something else beyond you, so that you can realize that whatever your problems are, there are people in the world dealing with much bigger problems than what you have.
100%. It's contribution, because contribution is a part of love.
Yeah.
So with the L, it's a very good point. Go and again, if you're trying to do it to benefit your relationship and you want to like throw gasoline on it, and invite your partner in and go do it together, right? Go. What's the charity? Operation Underground Railroad, like any charity, right? Do something together that like is gonna like benefit other people, and then you like start to see a different side of each other. So that's my little FML tool.
I love that. That's good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I think if everyone listening, if you haven't been able to tell it, the conversation might be slightly different than some of the interviews that I've done, or if you don't follow me online to see that Judge Anthony, aka Anthony Bompiani, that we're in a relationship.
Oh, together. I was wondering why you were like kind of giving me the eye there for a little. I was getting a little,
getting a little excited over there.
I was. Watch out.
So I get often tons of questions by people wanting to know relationships.
I get to tell them all your secrets,
all the bad stuff.
Everything else.
You get to tell them all the bad stuff.
There's no bad stuff.
But I thought it was important to share because, number one, if people enjoy this, we'll do more of them.
Sure.
So you can give us the feedback if this is something that's proven of value. Obviously, we don't claim to be relationship experts because we're both divorced.
Yeah.
So take it for what you want. We can tell you what not to do. So take it for what you want. But we have been able to find happiness and success and love in a deeper way than we've ever felt in our life after divorce, which I think is important because a lot of people have dealt with that and aren't sure if they're going to be able to find it. But one funny question I always get asked about is, what is it like for the person you're with? And I'm always like, what's that supposed to mean? And so I think the common question I always get asked is what it is like to be with a strong female.
Oh, man. How much time do we have? How much time is there? Look, you like,
and maybe just some. This is all for them, right? So some takeaways.
I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, obviously, like our relationship is wonderful. being with a strong, independent female, there are certain things that you have to do. You have to, I mentioned how we all have a little bit of narcissism in us and a little bit of ego in us, right? You really got to check that shit at the door. Like, you really got to limit.
More so than when you're not with a strong female? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, for so many reasons, right? It's not just like because this girl is going to be like running circles around you in a certain area of your life, right? And you gotta be able to sit well with that. You gotta be all right with that. That's an ego. That's an ego thing. That's not a man thing. That's an ego thing, right? They're going to be like networking and developing contacts, right? You gotta be cool with that. That's an ego thing.
Yeah.
Unless there's like something that happened in your relationship and there's reasons to like mistrust or distrust, right?
Yeah.
But if there's not, that's an ego thing. And you gotta, like, if you want to do it and if you want to be with a strong, independent female like that, you gotta be able to put that shit aside. And if you can't, you gotta work on it. And if you don't want to work on it, then you're probably not gonna be very happy, right? Because that's just the way that it is.
And she won't either.
And she won't either.
Because what'll happen is, I'm assuming if you don't do that, that's when most of my experience in life has been when then they don't do that and they're not working on themselves. So then it becomes control, right? Because it's like, if I can't feel good about what you're doing, I want to control what you're doing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And like the other thing is, and I don't have like a list of this stuff, I'm just telling you like off the top of my head, but like the other thing is like fellas, like, be straight with your lady about like what you're feeling. Like, a lot of the times your anger is really fear. You know, it's just that anger is a lot easier to show, especially for a man, than fear, right? Or sadness. A lot of times your anger is sadness, right? A lot of the times it's the root of it is your own insecurities. And it's fine. Like, don't run from it, because that's what we are with being human beings, right? So just be straight with, like, get clear in your own mind and in your own heart what you're feeling before you communicate it. And then the tools earlier I said about communicating it, make sure you communicate it in a non-abrasive way, right? In a way that she'll understand. And then the final thing is, which is very, very important, and I mentioned it earlier, but it's especially true whenever you're with a strong, independent female, is you gotta grow too. Like, you have to grow. And I'm not saying like you need to like go dollar for dollar, like earning or anything like that, right? But financial growth can be one area that you grow in. It doesn't have to be, right? Sure. It might be your contributional growth. Like, it might be like a thing where you like grow in that regard. Or maybe, you know, it could even be something as simple as like fitness growth. It has to be something where you are also growing as a human being to match her growth in those areas, because if not, then the killer that I talked about earlier will creep in, and that's the resentment. And you don't want that. And not only that, but whenever you're growing as well, it's going to help. It's going to not only make you a happier person to deal with, but it's also going to encourage her to continue to grow. Right? It's kind of like a hidden message of kind of like, this is what we do. Right? This is how we roll. We're going to grow together. Right?
Yeah. And if we look on the opposite side, so that we can talk to, because I know I have a lot of independent females that are in business and investors that listen. What are some of the things from your perspective that women can do when they're in a relationship to make that transition for a guy easier?
You mean like all the stuff that I just talked about?
No, like some of the stuff that the females can do, the women can do. Like some of the things maybe I do to you, maybe I don't.
Well, let's hear them, Candy.
To be able to have that environment for the guy to be able to grow and to be able to step up, because obviously you can, not intentionally, but as a strong female, you can actually make a man feel more insecure by certain things that you do. And I think that there's value in making sure, like, so there's some things that maybe, like, is there things that I've done that have given you that environment to be focused on growth?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And this is important, okay? There's a lot of like, and I know like this might like it might be a hot button topic in 2023 with all like the gender stuff going on, but like when you're talking like masculine and feminine, right? Regardless of if you want to call yourself a man or a woman or whatever, but there's certain things that the masculine end of a relationship does and the feminine end of a relationship does, right? And just because you as and you do this very well. And people that don't know you like I know you might not know this, but just because you are doing a lot of masculine type things as a independent, strong female, which you have to because that's how you're going to get along in the world that you're in, right? The outside world. Just because you're doing that and just because your guy is supporting that, don't neglect the feminine end of things either. Right?
Yep.
Now, when I say that, some of you women might be like, what the hell is he talking about? Like, no, I'm not talking about like cooking and cleaning and that shit. I don't mean that. I mean like the heartfelt stuff, right? If he's filling up your heart with support and encouragement and growth, then you got to fill up his heart with like, understanding and vulnerability and letting him know that he's like the only thing, the only one, like as far as love goes,
and
right?
Softness,
right?
Yeah.
Femininity. And you're real good with that. I mean, you scroll through your Instagram feed, or like if anybody's ever like seen like, I mean, I don't want to say on stage because you're a lot more authentic. Not that you're not authentic on Instagram, but you're a little guarded, which I get it, right? That's just.
Yeah, I think if people just saw me from the outside, they would think I'm more masculine 100% of the time.
Right, and that's not the case. And you're very good at there has to be that balance in a relationship, right? And in turn, I'm not trying to steal the credit that I just gave you, but I'm saying then the guy also has to. He might not be providing masculinity in every phase of the relationship, but you got to do it in some areas.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You got to step up as you got to be the man in some areas of the relationship. And I think we're really good at that.
Yeah.
I think you're very good at that in particular because you're a lot softer, and that makes me be able to encourage you a lot easier. Right? Because I know where your heart is.
Yeah,
right?
and I think for anyone listening too, like it's kind of like, well, it's easy to hear these concepts, but how do we apply them, right? If someone's listening on either side and they're like, oh, I should do that more, or a woman's listening and they're like, oh, I should do that more with my husband. Here's what I do, and maybe you can share what you do on your end. What I do is I tend to, because I'm naturally wired, as you know, to just go and go and go and go, and I will push the issue until not in an argument, but whatever project I'm working on or whatever thing I'm doing, I will push it until it's done. Period. Like relentlessly persistence. That's why I always say that the only reason I've been successful is because I'm relentlessly persistent when I'm after something. So for me, it is literally turning it off. Like it's a mental turn it off. And I don't know if you ever like feel me do this or know that I do it, but it's like sometimes I'll catch myself not shutting off and I stand up, I change my physiology. Like I normally will change the room, get out of the room just to have like a break moment if I'm working from home or something. And now it's like, I'm no longer business investor, hard ass candy. Now I'm in like relationship mode. And it's like totally different. I actually feel totally different. And it feels like the weight of the world is off my shoulders, basically the easiest way to describe it. Because when you're tackling something all day and then you can just stop and realize that you don't have to do that in your relationship, it's like the greatest gift.
Right. And then like we do, and like people are listening, that right there is the perfect opportunity for the man to step into the masculine role and provide the comfort.
Yeah.
Right? Provide
And we've figured it out, but I think if someone is in a relationship and you're not figuring it out, I think it's just like you said, communicate, have the conversation. Be like, hey, I noticed like at the end of the night, we're not connecting as much. What can we do? And then just establish it. Like Brendan Burchard always talks about door frame triggers when you go through a certain door to change your state. Well, I think when he talks about it, he always refers to like getting pumped up to like remember. But it can also be to reduce your nervous system, to come down on a door frame trigger. So if you are a person that goes to the office, maybe your door frame trigger to shut off is in the driveway or the garage door or your car door or your front door. Like that now this is a safe space and you can turn off. Like,
Yep.
I think that that's an important boundary to have.
Yep.
And also for women to understand that it's okay to do that.
100%.
You know?
It's not only okay, it's going to be beneficial in the relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope people understand too. It's not like they hear this and they think like, oh, you know, those two have it figured out. Those two like don't put any effort into the relationship. Like, we work real hard together.
Yeah.
Not only, I don't even mean like outside of the relationship, but I mean in the relationship, because we do want a great relationship all the time.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not going to be all the time, but for the most part.
That's the goal. I always say, like, you know, it's the
Yeah.
80-20 rule, right? It's like, can we focus to get at least 80% of the time to what we want? Because no relationship's going to be perfect. And the more outside influences you have, kids, blended families, like, I
Yep.
mean, there's so many complexities to relationships now that it's not like, you know, everyone says, oh, the divorce rate's so high. Well, yeah, but relationships and roles and priorities and two-income households. Oh, my gosh.
Look at what
like,
we have going on.
People think that it's crazy what we've got.
It's crazy. Like, it's crazy. But what the reason why I'm telling you that, I'm not telling you that to like toot my own horn. I'm telling you that because there are going to be challenges in your relationship. And the only way that I can do that is, number one, I got to make sure I'm healthy.
Yeah.
Like, I got to make sure, like,
And mentally,
right.
physically, every way,
Right.
like emotionally.
right. And again, I'm not saying this specifically for this, but you can apply this to difficult areas of your life. I got to like have a lot of like self-awareness and self-evaluation to understand when I am in like a shitty mood just
Yeah.
because I'm absolutely exhausted and my body doesn't know what time it is, right? And then also, and it's very important for people that are having challenges is to remember why you're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, remember why you do it every day, like every time. Like I always say, like every time I go to leave, I'm like a mixture of sad and happy. It's a crazy situation, but with any challenge you're doing, remember why you're doing it. Like you're doing it because it's important and it's worth it. And like on the other end of it, it's fabulous. Like
Any work, any amount of work, and I've known this from just 25 years of grinding. Now we're talking relationships. It's still a different type of work, but any type of work is worth it when you know your why.
yeah,
When you know why you're doing something, the work, the grind, the hustle, the focus becomes more easy
yeah,
to do that long term because you're clear on your why. And obviously, people don't have to be in a relationship. You could totally rock it single for as long as you want or forever.
Yeah.
Like you know me, I'm not about societal norms whatsoever. If somebody wants to do that, that's great. If you're like, relationships are too much work, I could totally see why some people would think that for sure. But if a relationship is something that's a focus for you and that you want that, it is worth doing the work.
it is.
So
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
The self-evaluation stuff's huge.
And self-awareness, I think the other thing too is just being aware of your own triggers and being able to communicate that. You spoke about triggers in the beginning about making sure of what your partners, but I know for me, like giving you grace, like you're going to do things without realizing that are going to trigger some part of me that some other person or some other situation or some past, behavior was the reason for that, but it's not your fault.
Yep.
So rather than reacting, I pause. And so my whole thing is, I always tell people using the pause method. Take the first 1/2 of 1 second.
Yep.
When someone says something to you and you think that you're going to be triggered or you're going to react, you're going to say something nasty, just take the first 1/2 of that first second and pause.
Yep.
Take 3 deep breaths. Be okay to sit in the silence and someone look at you like, are you going to say something? And then respond. It is amazing by resetting your nervous system how much of a better response you can give to your partner. And then I'll table that with one thing you say. You always tell your clients that in a high conflict situation,
Wait an hour.
And it was
Wait
so
an hour,
interesting because those are 2 of our different theories on 2 different sides for 2 different reasons. Mine was actually, I always said I did that with staff.
Yeah.
Like if you have a triggering staff moment or a client issue, but it also works with relationships.
Yeah.
So I think that's important for
Be
everyone
wild
to
to
capture.
sit there for an hour though.
What's that? It
It'd
would
be
be a
wild.
little while. Yeah, you might need to leave the room.
Yeah.
But if it's an email, like oftentimes we get triggered on an email and people want to like da-da-da-da-da-da. It's like, no, you just wait. Just wait.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the same, like, because in a divorce, like, I'm coaching people and consulting with people how to basically, like, communicate, knowing that, like, or expecting that, like, a judge is going to see it. But what's interesting about it is it's really the same kind of tools for a successful relationship. Like, you never want to communicate. I mean, we say this, but we do it.
We
like,
do
you
it,
don't want to
sure.
communicate when you're angry if you can't, if you don't have to, right? Because you're going to say something that you're not going to want to say, or that you're going to regret, or it's not really like you're misinterpreting things, right? And to piggyback on what you said about Grace, another thing, and
I thought you were talking about our dog.
yeah, right. We have a dog named Grace, a little cute little pit
I was like,
bull.
wait, what?
Yeah, but another thing that's very important that we haven't talked about as much, but it's because I just heard about it last weekend, is mercy.
Yeah.
Mercy and grace, and I think you referenced PT earlier, and he said that basically grace is giving something that they don't deserve, right? Mm-hmm. And mercy is withholding something that they do deserve, right? Yeah. So it goes hand in hand, and that again that goes back to faith too. But those are both very important things, because shit's not always going to be perfect. Right. Yeah. So, but if you really love the person, then you gotta have some grace and you gotta have some mercy. Yeah. Like for both, right?
Yeah. And I think that if you got nothing else from this podcast, if you got that grace and mercy, and then also the pause reprogram, making sure that you take those pause, it will save you so much hassle and headaches and pain if you don't react in those really difficult times. So I think this is a really valuable conversation, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you one final question that we typically ask our guests, and this brings it back. So this can be anything at all, whatever pops into your mind. But what does the definition of wealth mean to you?
You know, and I'm going to steal this. I think it was because it's always had an impact on me. Warren Buffett, which I'm not even like a big Warren Buffett fan, but I think this is wealth, right? Because this is like, it was an answer. He was given a question about what is success, right? And I'm going to use the same answer he used for wealth, because I think it's true, and it hit me. And it basically is, whenever you're done with your life, if everybody that you loved you back, that you were successful. And I think that's true, that if everybody that you love loves you back, I think you're wealthy, right? And I think that's way more important than any amounts of dollar wealth or assets or anything else. And not only that, but I think if you're in that situation where you are happy because you are in love with someone and being loved by people, that you are going to create more actual wealth. Yeah. Because you're going to be happy, you're going to feel important. So that's it. That's the answer.
I like that. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, it reminds me, there was a guy, he's about a 20, I'm blanking on his name, but he's about a $20 billion net worth. And he said, all of the money I've accumulated, all of the things I've done, and my kids don't even want to come home and see me. Yeah. How rich am I really?
So unbelievable. I mean,
and I thought that was it's almost the opposite of what you're saying, where he said he realized he did all of these things. Yeah. He has no wife. He did some things in his relationship. His kids don't even want to come home and see him. And I know another person like that, not to that wealth, but same thing, millions and millions of dollars. Yeah. And his kids just really wanted nothing to do with him because of who he was, not because of what he had. And so I think that's why on the show, of course, we talk about assets and money, but it's not just about the assets you have. Like, if that is your only goal, you will miss having a rich life. And it takes health, it takes spirituality, it takes relationships, it takes wealth and business and all of those things to create a really rich life. So
remember I told you the story that I heard from the Joe Rogan podcast was the guy that was the businessman that was successful and hustler and building all kinds of wealth and assets and everything. And then he and his wife had a baby, and she had some complications, and he was there at the hospital with her, and she had the baby. Everything seemed to be fine. He left the hospital, went down the street to grab something for lunch.
Oh, I remember.
And on the way there, he was having this internal conversation with himself. Like, this is crazy. Like, why am I pushing like this? Like, I got this, I got to make this decision. Like, am I going to focus on like my building my wealth and my assets, or am I going to focus on like, my family and be there for them and love them and everything? And he made the decision as he was getting lunch that like he's going to start to turn his focus to like make his like home life happy, right? He walks back, he goes back to see her, gets back to the hospital, she freaking passed away while he was gone. I remember. And at that moment, nothing else mattered. Yeah. Like, nothing else freaking mattered. And that's not to say that, like, obviously, we're Generation Wealth podcast. Like, that's not to say that none of that's important. Like, you can do great things with your wealth. Yeah. But you got to get your shit in perspective, because, the story that I was always told was that no one's on their deathbed wishing that they made more money.
Yeah.
Right? You're on your deathbed wishing that you had more experiences with the people that you love than the people who left you back. So.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Let everyone know, where can they find you?
Thanks for having me. JudgeAnthony.com. That's my website. Yeah, go to it. You'll see my content.
Instagram, TikTok.
Instagram, TikTok. You know, all that happy stuff. So.
Well, this was fun.
Yeah,
Thanks.
It was good. Anytime.